the Midnight Rain, and today we are doing episode 11 of the It's Not All Doom and Gloom podcast. So, if you're new to my podcast, welcome. I am the Midnight Raven, and we have done a variety of things throughout the podcast series. Today, we are looking at some more self discovery journal prompts. We started this in last week's podcast, so today we are looking at some more self-discovery journal prompts. So, whether you see a counselor or a therapist, or whether you divulge your deepest and darkest concerns to your friends, your family, or sometimes you just need that listening ear, today is the day where you can share your thoughts, your feelings, and your emotions in the comments to these little journal prompts. So I personally see a counsellor. I have made no shy that I see a counsellor a couple of times a month. And today we're going to look at some more journal prompts that come from this self-discovery journal prompt that I have been using to cope and get my thoughts, feelings, and emotions out there, because the worst thing you can do is harbour your emotions and keep things close to your chest, which I have only just learned and should have learned before. So today we're going to look at some of the questions, and if you want to share your answers to some of these questions in the chat, you can be as open and as honest as you wish. I am going to be doing exactly the same and sharing with you my thoughts, feelings, and emotions on whatever these questions have to be. You can share as little or as much as you like. And remember that nobody is judging you for whatever you write. So, looking today, the first question is, what's something you've always wanted to try but have never tried? So this is a question about putting yourself maybe out there. Maybe you've had something you've always wanted to do, like bungee jump, get a tattoo, maybe go for that promotion you've always wanted to go for. Something you've always wanted to try but haven't yet. I mean, I would love to be able to drive. I think driving a car nowadays is probably an essential thing. Now, I have driven a car once. It didn't go well. I was in a friend's car many, many moons ago. All my family know. And I was probably 16 at the time. I'd got in my friend's car. We went down a little lane, maybe, I don't know, 100 meters. And I just panicked the entire time. I was in tears by the end of it. I couldn't get the gear changes. I couldn't work on the clutch. I had a mini meltdown. And it kind of scared me from wanting to drive, because it seemed so much pressure. You're in charge of the car. You're in charge of the safety and the people in the car. You have to watch out for people around you. And there are so many dumb drivers in the world. You see people all the time just cutting you off and making silly mistakes, and it's even more dangerous as a pedestrian. Sometimes the most dangerous thing in the world is being a pedestrian, let alone being in the car. But I think I would love to be able to drive if I could, like, take myself out of my own head, instead of necessarily like worrying constantly about other people. I think I'd be really good at driving, and I think driving would be beneficial. Um, but you know, it's always something I've wanted to do, and I have, like I said, driven once, and it just scared me. But I guess I would love to try again at some point. I think it would be beneficial to do something like that, because not only would it benefit me, it could also benefit my sons, my family, and stuff like that. So, moving on to the next one. What's your relationship like with your parents? Now, people will stigma any traumas you have in your life back to your childhood. Numerous times you'll hear it from counselling session notes that if you go to a counsellor, the first thing they do is they look at your childhood, they look at your parents, and they look at your upbringing. Now, a bad upbringing can bring the worst out of people. It can bring resentment and hate and maybe anger towards your parents. Or you may have had the most happiest, happy-go-lucky parents in the world and turned into a serial killer. Um, there is that. My relationship with my parents has always been rocky. Not going to lie, it's always been rocky. I've never gelled with my parents. Um, we'll start with my mother. I never really gelled with my mum, although I love my mum dearly. You should always love your mum, no matter what you've gone through. At the end of the day, she's still your mother. She still brought you into the world. We've never really had that motherly daughter bond. I don't know why. We just never had it. You know, as I said, you love your mother dearly. She brought you into the world, but we just don't gel. Now, my dad, on the other hand, is a different kettle of fish. When I was younger, I probably had a better bond with my dad. But then as the years went on, the bond became strained and distant and separated until it became non-existent. And I'm actually happy about that. I can't go into too much, but sometimes you wish you didn't have parents, and this one I wish I didn't have. But relationships with your parents can change. Me and my mum never really gelled, and that's always been consistent. Me and my dad were kind of close, and then it just dispersed. You can have relationships with your parents that change over the years. Maybe you move away, you get your own family, you don't see them as more. And you can grow apart from not just your parents, but your sisters, your friends. Life throws a lot at us, not gonna lie. Whether it's, having to work constantly or having kids or having to move somewhere, and life is always throwing things at you. So relationships can always become strained, but then they can always rebuild again. um Unfortunately, this relationship with my dad would never heal, and the relationship with my mum, I love my mum dearly. It's just we just don't gel. And that's perfectly fine because we still live in each other's lives. I still see my mum, she still sees me. We just don't have that like motherly bond. And that's perfectly fine. Um, we're not asking, you don't have to live within your mum and dad's lives consistently, because that's what being a grown up is. You kind of go off and you do your own thing, and then they're there if they need you, or if you want to hang out with them and that. Some people see their mother and they talk to their mother and father every day. Some people see them a couple of times a year. Some will see them only at Christmas. Some will never see their parents. It's each to their own. So relationships don't always have to be the same as everybody else's. I think the relationships you have with your parents are singular to yourself, and the relationships that my sisters have with my parents are entirely different to the relationships I have with my parents. Um, so the next question is, if you could talk to your younger self, what would you say? So this is a good one. So people ask this question quite a lot. You get it in like interviews and stuff of like, oh, if you could, go back 10 years, would you change stuff? Or if you could go back to when you were younger, what would you tell yourself? So if I could talk to my younger self, what would I say? Maybe take life a bit more chilled would probably be the thing. I went through life quite quickly. I went from being a teenager to being a young adult to having kids to having a family at like 100 miles an hour. I had a child by the time I was 18, then I had another child. Luckily, I then had a 5-year break because boy, I was exhausted. And then I've had a third child, obviously, that's now 16. And then I've tried to had careers in between. I've tried to keep friends. I think I would take life a bit slower, a bit more relaxed, a bit chilled. You know, life is a journey, not a race. The idea is to enjoy life. Getting to the finish line just kind of, rushes it. A bit like reading a book. You want to take your time and read it, because once you reach that final page, that's the end of the story. Um, I would tell myself to take things a bit slower, to live a little, to enjoy life. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't regret having my kids. I don't regret how life has gone. But in hindsight, a lot of people would say the same things, I am sure, that, life throws a lot at you when you become a teenager to an adult, and you are thrown into this world where you have to survive. You suddenly get a job, you go to college, you pay your own bills, you maybe have kids, and you're thrown straight into this world of, go, 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 go. Going from a child, who sits in their room, watches telly, games at the weekend, to having to work 10, 12-hour days, to have bills on your mind, to worry about your children, if you have children at that time. And life becomes super quick, like every day rolls into one another. I would tell myself to take things a bit more relaxed, a bit chilled, a little bit more of an easy pace, not to pressure yourself so much, that kind of thing. Like, each day should be fun. You shouldn't get home every night and be like, oh gosh, the day I've had, because that can become the norm. So talking to my younger self, I would tell myself to be more chilled, to be more mellow, to take things a little bit less stressful. But that's easy to say in hindsight. Back then I'm 40 years old now, so 40 years ago, things were a lot different. When I was born, it was the 80s. Things were a lot different compared to now. And, looking back, that was probably the lifestyle. Nowadays, things are a bit more chilled. People are a bit more relaxed in their lives. But at the end of the day, you do have bills to pay. Life goes on, and, gotta make that money, I guess. So the next question would be, who were you closest to in your childhood? So this could be your friends at school. It could be your family. Maybe you had a really tight bond. Maybe it was the kids you hung down the park with. Maybe it was the kids you did the naughty things with. The smoking behind the bike sheds, maybe drinking the white lightning down the park. We've all done it. Me personally, closest to in my childhood would have been a select few friends. I wasn't really one for having a big group of friends. I'm not introverted necessarily, but I like to have a close circle. I'm not one for having like masses and masses of friends. When we would go down the park, we'd have our little cliques, if you want to call it, little groups. Um, and There was a friend. I'm not gonna name his name, but we were really close. He was a good friend. He had some sisters. He had a younger brother. He was amazing. We'd hang down the park and we'd chat and we'd hung out. And he was just such a bright boy and cute, not gonna lie. And he was probably the closest thing I had at that time to a best friend. We spent quite a lot of time hanging out and chilling together. And he'd be, at the park, and I'd go down there, and he'd call for me, and I'd call for him. And it was a big, big part of my life during my childhood. There were other friends that I had, but selectively, I didn't really have a lot of friends that I hung around with. I had quite a few friends when I was at school that I would hang out with at lunchtime and that, but they weren't friends I'd then hang out with like outside of like school. They didn't live near me. But I didn't really have like really close people. The thing is, I'm very Alexa, stop. Alexa, stop. Sorry about that. I'm like very guarded, and I don't really get close to people, really. Sorry about that. um, but yeah, I mean, a lot of people, you know, during your childhood, you do bond with people, high school, primary school. But as you get older, you find that your circle of friends changes. Maybe you go to uni, maybe you start work. The friends that you had, like through primary school, through high school, through your teenage years, through to college, uni, it's very, very small chance that you carry on them friends right into your adult life and later in life. Your circle of friends generally changes over the years. It either gets bigger or gets smaller, or people come out your life and then they come back in because everybody moves on with their lives, you know. People all have kids, have families, and life just kind of gradually progresses and moves on, like, you know, like everybody else. um but yeah, I would say that the closest people in my life were a very select few. um and there's nothing wrong with having a very select group of friends, you know, that you trust, rely on, and hang out with. So, I think we're on the last one for today. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're on the last one for today. And the last one for today is, what's the scariest thing you've ever done? Scariest thing I've ever done is probably having children. Not gonna lie. The scariest thing I think you can do in life is give birth to another life who you then look after for the rest of their lives until you're no longer here. Um, I didn't plan to have children. Children were not in the Book of Raven back in the day. And I became pregnant at 17 and had my first child. And my eldest has turned into a bright young man with his own little family. And it is one of the scariest things I've ever done is have a child. The pregnancy was traumatic. The birth was traumatic. Not gonna lie, I was unprepared for that kind of situation. And back in the 80s, having a child out of wedlock, I did get looks. I did get looks on the fact I was 18 or just under 18. I did get looks on the fact that I didn't have a partner at the time. I did get looks that I was living with my parents. Oh, the scorn of looks I got from one midwife that was at that hospital at that time, I will never forgive. The look she gave of, oh, you're 17. Oh, and is the dad coming to see the baby? And I said, no, we're not together. Oh, okay. And then just the look of disgust, the look of judgment. Um, And then obviously I had a second child, my middle child, who is a bright fellow. And then I obviously, as you know, have my youngest, who now currently lives with me. He is turning into a bright young fella himself, his own little self-proclaimed farmer, which is what he would love to be. He has a farming obsession at the minute with Farming Simulator. And he's addicted to watching Jeremy Clarkson's farming stuff. So why not? But yeah, I think the scariest thing I ever did was have kids and be thrown into such a tumultuous existence with having kids at such a young age, no job, no support system, really, because all you did was get judged. And I have brought up three mature, well adapted, smart boys into the world, and I have done the best I could under the situations that I was put in. I don't regret having my children. Would I have had my children at that time had situations not have happened? I wouldn't have had my first, and my first already knows this. I didn't plan to have children straight away. I had planned to have a career, and I am more career based than child based. I must admit, my career does mean a lot to me. Um, but I have also dipped in and out of my career whilst having kids. Um, so I have had the best of both worlds. I have had a career and I've had my kids, and I am going to continue to, you know, work on having a career now that all my kids have virtually gone off into the world. I still have my youngest; he is only 16, so a few more years of motherly training before he branches out into the world himself. But that's probably the scariest thing I've ever done, bringing a life into this world, especially now, is daunting. Bringing a baby into this day and age where things are just so up and down. I'm not gonna lie, it was hard in the 80s. I guarantee you it's even harder now. I think having a baby back in the 80s was probably a lot easier. Not gonna lie. You wouldn't think that, but I personally think it was easier. But there we go. And that is the podcast for today. This was the It's Not All Doom and Gloom, episode 11. I hope you enjoyed this podcast for today. We're just going to run through what the questions were. If you'd like to share your opinions, your thoughts, and your feelings, please do so. Okay, number one was, what's something you've always wanted to try but haven't? Number two was, what was your relationship like with your parents? The next one was, if you could talk to your younger self, what would you say? Who were you closest to in your childhood? And what was the scariest thing you've ever done? So these journal prompts are for you to look at maybe the past, the present, and the future, maybe lessons you could learn from, things that you want to achieve in the future. And these are like prompts that you can give yourself weekly, monthly, daily, if you so wish. There are 365 altogether. So far, we have done 10, and we are looking to do this, like I said, on a weekly basis, maybe 2 a week. It depends how I feel. Obviously, I am having counseling myself, and delving into things like this can bring up some thoughts, feelings, and emotions depending on the questions. You can share as much or as little as you want in the comments. If you'd like to share this out to somebody you think it could help. It's Not All Doom and Gloom podcast, brought to you by the Midnight Raven, and I will see you all very soon for another episode. Have a wonderful day and take care of yourself. Bye, guys.